I came to my boss's house to drop off her things, a box of project files, a laptop charger, and a card signed by 14 people. That was it, a 5-minute errand. I was going to knock, hand it over, and drive home. But when she opened that door, barely covered in an old faded t-shirt with no makeup, messy hair, a knee brace, and a cane in her left hand, I was not looking at my boss anymore. I was looking at a woman I had never met, and she was looking at me like I was the first person she had seen in 6 days who was not a doctor or a delivery driver. My name is Ethan Mercer. I am 31 years old. I served 2 tours in the United States Army before coming home to a marriage that did not survive the distance and a divorce that was so quiet it barely made a sound. I work as a project coordinator at a design firm in Ashford Hills, North Carolina. And my boss, Caroline Ashford, 41 years old, the sharpest woman in any room she walks into, the woman who has never been married, who built her entire career from nothing, who comes home every night to a house so quiet she leaves the radio on just to hear another voice. That woman looked at me standing on her porch holding a cardboard box and said 2 words that changed everything. Come in. But here is what I did not know when I stepped through that door. I did not know that my ex-wife would call 3 weeks later asking me to come back. I did not know that the woman standing in front of me had not let a single person into that house in over a year. And I did not know that a leaning bookshelf, a broken coffee maker, and a Tuesday afternoon would quietly and completely turn 2 lonely people into something neither of us saw coming. So why did a decorated Army veteran drive 40 minutes to deliver a box he could have left on a porch? What was Caroline Ashford hiding behind 15 years of walls she built so carefully that even she forgot she was inside them? And what happens when 2 people who gave up on being known finally meet someone who refuses to stop paying attention? I should have set the box down inside the door and left. Every reasonable part of my brain was saying the same thing. You do not sit down in your boss's house on a Tuesday evening. You do not stand in her kitchen watching her move around in bare feet on hardwood floors. You say thank you, you wish her well, and you go home. But something about the way she turned away from the door and walked toward the kitchen, slow and careful with that cane tapping against the floor, not looking back to see if I was following, just trusting that I would, made me close the door behind me and step inside. The house was nothing like her office. Her office was glass and clean lines and everything in its place. But this house was warm. There was a deep green couch with a wool blanket draped over one arm, a bookshelf on the far wall packed so tight that books were stacked sideways on top because there was no more room. There were plants on the windowsill, real ones, not the kind you buy and forget. There was a reading lamp beside the couch with a cracked base that had been glued back together instead of replaced. And there was a radio on the kitchen counter, turned low, playing something soft and jazzy that filled the room like background heat. She left the radio on so the house would not be silent. I understood that in a way I wished I did not. I followed her into the kitchen. She pointed to a pour-over coffee setup on the counter, a glass carafe, a gooseneck kettle, a bag of beans, a hand grinder, and a small digital scale all sitting together like a puzzle no one had solved. She said her colleague had given it to her last Christmas. She said she had been trying for 11 months and every cup still tasted wrong. I looked at the setup. I looked at her. Is the water too hot when you pour it? She narrowed her eyes. How would I know that? If it is boiling when it hits the grounds, it burns them. You want it about 30 seconds after the kettle shuts off, just below boiling. She leaned against the counter and folded her arms the way she did in meetings when someone said something she had not expected. Interested, but not yet convinced. You know about pour-over coffee, she said. I know about a lot of things that do not come up at work. She handed me the kettle without a word. Show me. So I made coffee, in my boss's kitchen, on a Tuesday evening in October, while she sat on a stool at the island with her chin resting on her hand and her reading glasses pushed up into her hair, and watched me with the kind of quiet attention that made the room feel smaller, in a way I did not mind. I walked her through the ratio. I showed her the pour pattern. I told her about the bloom, that first pour where the grounds swell and release gas, and you have to stop and wait before you continue. You have to let it breathe. She said, you are telling me the coffee needs a moment to collect itself before it can do its job. I said, basically, yes. She said, I relate to that more than I should. The coffee came out right. I poured 2 cups. She tasted hers and went still for a second. Then she looked at me over the rim and said, "That is the first good cup this machine has made in this house." She paused. "I am mildly furious it took you 5 minutes to fix an 11-month problem." I said, "Some problems just need a different set of hands." She held my gaze for half a second longer than she needed to. Then she looked away and said, "Sit down." Not rude, direct. I sat. We talked. She asked me how long I had been at the firm. I said 3 years. She nodded. She asked what I had done before that. I told her I was Army. 2 tours. Came back and needed something to do with my hands that did not involve a weapon. Construction felt close enough to building something without tearing something down first. She listened. Not the polite kind of listening where a person waits for their turn. She actually listened. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered something I said 5 minutes earlier and circled back to it. And when I mentioned the divorce, just barely, just the edge of it, she did not flinch or change the subject or offer sympathy I did not ask for. She just said, "How long ago?" 2 years. Was it loud or quiet? Quiet. The quiet kind is worse. She looked at me steadily. "Yes, it is." She said it like she knew, not from experience, from observation, from years of watching people around her go through it while she stood on the outside, close enough to understand, but too far away to be part of it. An hour passed, then another. She told me she had worked her way through school. No family money, no safety net. She told me she had started at the firm as a mid-level coordinator and spent 9 years turning herself into the person who ran the entire commercial division. She told me she had never been married. She said it plainly, the way you say a fact you have repeated so many times it has lost its edges. I asked why. She picked up her cup. Because I was building something, and I told myself there would be time for the rest later. She looked at the cup. Later came and went, and I realized the house I built was solid and clean and professionally decorated and completely empty. The radio played low on the counter behind her. The kitchen window had gone dark. The neighborhood outside was quiet, and I sat there in that warm kitchen with a woman I had worked beside for 3 years, but never actually seen until tonight. And I felt something shift underneath me. Not an earthquake, not a crack. More like a door opening and a wall I had forgotten was there. I stood up to leave. She walked me to the front door, her cane tapping softly on the hardwood. As I passed the living room, I noticed the bookshelf. Up close, it was worse than I had thought. The whole frame was leaning about 2 inches off the wall at the top. The anchor bolts had pulled loose from the drywall. One good bump and 200 pounds of books and hardwood would come crashing down. I stopped. "How long has this been like this?" She glanced at it. "A while." "This is dangerous, Caroline. If this falls, it is not just books. It is real damage." She looked at the shelf, then at me. "Are you going to fix my bookshelf, Ethan?" "Not tonight, but I could come back Saturday." "If you would let me." Something passed across her face, quick and quiet, like a window that had been painted shut finally cracking open just enough to let air through. "Saturday," she said, "after 10. I will make the coffee. You can tell me if I finally got it right." I nodded. I stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cool and still. The porch light above the door flickered once and held. I walked to my truck and sat behind the wheel for a full minute without turning the key, because something had just happened in that house. Something I could not name yet and was not ready to. But I could feel it settling into me, the way warmth settles into a room when someone finally turns the heat on after a long time of leaving it off. And the hardest part, the most honest part, was that I did not want it to stop. Saturday came, and I told myself it was about the bookshelf. I said it out loud in my apartment while I laced my boots. I said it again in the hardware store picking out toggle bolts. I said it one more time in her driveway with a toolkit on the passenger seat and 2 cups of coffee from the shop on Redmond Street. 2 cups. I was past pretending, but I was not ready to say what the truth actually was, so I kept saying bookshelf. She opened the door in dark jeans and a cream sweater with the sleeves pushed up, hair down, no cane. She was standing on her own. And something about the way she stood there was different from Tuesday. Less guarded, like she had decided how much of herself to leave visible when I came back. And the answer was more than before. She looked at the hardware bag and said, "You are serious about this bookshelf. I brought a stud finder. I hope you do not expect me to make a joke about that. I was counting on it." She caught the laugh, let half of it out anyway. "Coffee first," I practiced. She had. The pour was close. The timing was better. She handed me a cup with the quiet pride of someone who had worked at something alone and wanted it noticed without asking. I tasted it. 90%. What is the other 10? Patience. You poured the second stage too early. The bloom was not finished. She held the cup with both hands and looked at me. "You know what I have discovered about you, Ethan? You pay attention to things most people do not even know they are supposed to be looking at." I had no answer for that. I took my coffee to the living room and got to work. Oh, the bookshelf was worse than I remembered. Both anchors had ripped clean through the drywall. The frame had been tipping for months, held up by nothing but its own weight. One stumble with that cane, and it would have come down on top of her. She sat on the couch and directed me. "Top shelf is alphabetical. Second shelf is organized by when I read them. Third shelf is books I intend to read." "You organize a shelf by the order you read them?" "It is a timeline. I look at it and remember exactly where I was in my life." I pulled a worn paperback from the middle and held it up. "What year?" She barely glanced. 2021. January. I was up for the division lead, could not sleep, read it in 2 nights because it was the only thing that made my brain stop. I set the book down carefully. Every book on that shelf was a chapter of her life. And for 6 months, the whole thing had been leaning toward the floor because she was too busy holding everything else in place to notice. I found the studs, drilled proper anchors, secured the frame with bolts that would hold 5 times the weight. When the last book was back, I checked the level. Perfectly straight, flush against the wall. She crossed the room, pressed her hand flat against the frame. It did not move. "How long will that hold?" "Longer than the wall." She turned to look at me. We were close, closer than we had ever been. And I felt it the way you feel a sound move from the background to the center of the room. "Thank you," she said, not casually, like the words carried real weight. "It was just a bookshelf." "No," she said quietly, "it was not." She made lunch. We ate at the kitchen table. And then she asked me something no one had asked in years. "What would you build if you could build anything? No client, no budget, no rules." That question used to live in my chest like a heartbeat. In architecture school, I thought about it constantly. But somewhere between the army and the divorce and the years of drafting other people's visions, I had stopped asking. I told her that. She put her fork down. "That is the thing you need to fix next, not my bookshelf." We moved to the back porch, 2 chairs facing the yard. She offered me a drink. I said I was fine. She looked at me sideways. "You say that word a lot. You use it like a door you keep closing before anyone can see inside. What would you like me to say instead?" "Whatever is actually true. The Army trained me to keep things locked down. 2 tours taught me the safest version of yourself is the one that needs nothing from anyone. My marriage confirmed it. Sarah wanted me to talk. I did not know how. She wanted me to come back from deployment and be the man she remembered. But that man had been replaced by someone who checked exits in every room, slept with one ear open, and could not explain why a car backfiring made his hands shake. She did not leave because she stopped loving me. She left because she could not reach me. I had never told anyone that version. But sitting on Caroline's porch, I told her all of it. The silence that grew between Sarah and me. The afternoon I found her bags by the door and felt nothing. And how feeling nothing scared me more than the deployment ever did. Caroline did not interrupt, did not say sorry, did not try to fix it. She just let me say it. When I finished, she said, "You know what that is, right? That is what it feels like when you have been surviving so long you forgot to check if you were actually living." She paused. "I know because I have done the same thing. Different war, same result. I spent 15 years building a career so I would never need anyone. And it worked. I do not need anyone." She looked at her glass. "But I would like to want someone again. And that is the part I forgot how to do." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was the kind that happens when 2 people say something true and sit inside the echo of it. I said, I am not fine. I have not been fine in a while, but I am better here. She turned to me. Her eyes were steady and warm and open in a way I had never seen from her. Not in any meeting, not in any review, and not once in 3 years. Me too, she said softly. 2 words, but they landed with the weight of something both of us had been carrying alone for years, and just, for the first time, sat down together. The next week at work, Megan stopped by my desk. You seem different, lighter, like you are thinking about something that is not here. I told her I was focused on specs. She said, sure, in a tone that meant she believed nothing. The following Saturday, I showed up and Caroline had paint on her forearm and a dot of blue near her jaw she did not know about. She was repainting the spare bedroom. I picked up the roller without being asked. We painted in comfortable silence, moving around each other like people who had been doing it for years instead of weeks. Halfway through the second coat, she said, why did you and Sarah not try again? Because by the time we realized what was happening, we were not the same people who got married. Do you miss her? I miss who I was when I thought I could be what she needed. She was quiet. Then she said, that might be the most honest thing anyone has ever said in this house. Over lunch, her phone buzzed. Her whole body changed. The ease left her shoulders. She silenced it. It buzzed again. She turned it face down. Then she said, there is something I need to tell you. That was Graham Whitley, a man I was seeing for about a year. We ended things 8 months ago because he wanted a version of me with fewer edges. But he has not accepted it. He calls. He drives by. He showed up at my office once with flowers like persistence is charming instead of exhausting. Is he dangerous? No. And he is a man who lost something and cannot stop reaching for it. She looked at me. If you keep coming here, you will cross paths with him. I want you to hear it from me. You are not scared off? She asked. What scared me was not Graham. I had faced things that shot back. What scared me was the way she looked right now, guard half down, watching my face for the first sign I would do what everyone else did, pull away when it got complicated. Not even a little, I said. Something moved behind her eyes, like a match striking in a dark room. It settled into something steadier, the beginning of trust. Tuesday, she said. Come back Tuesday. But what neither of us knew was that the next Tuesday would change everything. Because it was not Graham who disrupted it. It was someone I had not spoken to in over a year. Someone whose voice on my phone at 9:47 that evening cut through every wall I had rebuilt since the divorce. It was Sarah, my ex-wife. And the first thing she said was, Ethan, I made a mistake. I want to come home. Sarah's voice on the phone sounded exactly the way I remembered it. Soft, careful. The voice of a woman choosing every word like she was walking across ice and testing each step before putting her weight down. She said she had been thinking. She said time had given her clarity. She said she understood now what she had not understood then, that I was not broken when I came home. I was just different, and she had not known how to love the different version. She said she was ready to learn, and for about 10 seconds, the old version of me, the one who had spent 2 years believing the divorce was his fault, wanted to say yes, because that is what guilt does. It makes the familiar feel like the right thing, even when it is just the easy thing. But then I looked at my kitchen counter, and I saw the bag of pour-over coffee I had bought that week. Not for me, for practice, because I had been planning to bring it to Caroline's on Saturday and show her a different brewing method. And I realized something so clearly, it almost knocked the air out of me. I had not bought coffee for Sarah in 2 years. I had not thought about what she needed or wanted or liked in longer than I could remember. But I had memorized how Caroline took hers. Black, no sugar, poured slow, and I had done it without trying, the way you learn the habits of someone who matters to you, not because you are performing love, but because you are paying attention. I told Sarah the truth. I told her I was grateful she called. I told her I hoped she found what she was looking for. But I told her that the man she was remembering no longer existed, and the man who had taken his place was already becoming someone new, someone better, someone who had finally stopped surviving and started choosing. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, there is someone, is there not? I said, yes. She said, is she good to you? I said, "She is honest with me. That is better." Sarah wished me well. She meant it. I could hear it in the way her voice steadied at the end, like she had gotten the answer she needed, even if it was not the one she wanted. We hung up, and I sat in my apartment in the quiet and felt something I had not felt in years. Not relief, not sadness, closure, the real kind. The kind that does not slam a door. It just gently lets it swing shut on its own. Tuesday came. I drove to Caroline's house with the pour-over coffee and a feeling in my chest like I was carrying something fragile and important, and finally ready to hand it to someone I trusted not to drop it. She opened the door, read my face in about 3 seconds, said, "Something happened." I told her about Sarah's call, every word. I stood in her kitchen and gave her the full truth because she had asked me weeks ago to stop saying fine and start saying what was real, and I was done being the man who closed doors before anyone could look inside. Caroline listened without moving. When I finished, she said, "And what did you tell her?" I told her no. "Why?" I looked at her. She was standing by the counter with the morning light coming through the window behind her, catching the edge of her hair the way it always did at that angle. She was not performing anything, not managing a room, not running a meeting. She was just a woman in her kitchen asking a man a question she needed the real answer to. "Because I am already where I want to be," I said. She held my gaze. Something trembled at the edges of her composure. Not weakness, the opposite. The kind of trembling that happens when someone who has held everything together for years finally lets themselves feel the thing they have been keeping at arm's length. She said, "I have not let someone choose me in a very long time. I am not sure I remember how to receive it." "You do not have to do anything with it," I said. "Just do not send me home." She laughed. A real one. The kind that breaks the tension exactly where it needs to break. And her eyes were bright and full of something I had never seen in them before. Not at work, not on the porch, not even the day I fixed the bookshelf. It was the look of a woman who had just realized the thing she stopped hoping for had shown up anyway. She said, "Make the coffee. I will set the table." The next 3 weeks were the most alive I had felt since before the uniform. Tuesdays and Saturdays turned into Tuesdays, and Thursdays and Saturdays. Then the other days started filling in too, the way color fills in a sketch that has only been pencil lines for too long. I told her about the transfer. Henderson's team needed a senior drafter for the municipal projects. He had asked me twice. I could move laterally, same firm, same work. I would just stop being someone she had authority over. She looked at me across her kitchen table and said, "Hey, you have been thinking about this. Since the first Saturday." Something moved across her face. Not surprise, recognition. The look of a person who realizes the other one has been keeping pace all along. "You would give up your position on my team. I would give up reporting to you, so I could start showing up at your door without a toolbox as an excuse." She smiled, quiet and certain and full of a warmth that made the whole room feel smaller in the best way. I made the transfer. Drew figured it out before I told him. He looked at me across the lunch table and said, "It is Caroline." I did not deny it. He said, "Good. She is the best person at this firm, and you are the only one I have met who might actually deserve her." Megan found out because Megan finds out everything. She came to my desk and said, "How do I know about you and Ashford?" I said nothing. She said, "For what it is worth, I have never seen you look like this." Then she walked away. Graham showed up on a Sunday. I was in the backyard helping Caroline stake out a raised garden bed she wanted to build. He came through the side gate without knocking, the way a man walks into a space he still believes is his. He was taller than I expected, well-dressed, the kind of polish that needs an audience to work. He looked at me. He looked at the measuring tape in my hands. He looked at Caroline. "So you are the reason she stopped answering," he said. Caroline straightened up. "Graham, I stopped answering because I was done. That happened before Ethan. You just were not listening." He looked at me again with the steady gaze of a man deciding whether to make a scene. I did not tense. I did not step forward. I just stood there. Because the most powerful thing you can do in a charged moment is be completely still. The Army taught me that. Caroline confirmed it. He left. Not gracefully. He left the way people leave when the door they keep pushing has finally been locked from the other side. Caroline stood in the yard after his car pulled away. I did not touch her. I just stood beside her. She said, "He is not a bad person. He is just a man who does not know how to let something end." I said, "That sounds exhausting." She looked at me. It was. For years it was. She picked up a garden stake. It is not anymore. We built the raised bed that afternoon. By the time the sun was low and the frame was level, she was laughing about something I had said, and the place where Graham had stood did not hold anything anymore. On a Saturday morning, 4 months after a cardboard box and a faded t-shirt and a cup of coffee I was only supposed to deliver and leave, I sat at Caroline Ashford's kitchen table while she made pour-over coffee with the easy confidence of someone who had been doing it perfectly for months. She set a cup in front of me, sat across the table with her own. The morning light came through the window the same way it always did. She said, "The bookshelf has not moved." I said, "Told you, longer than the wall." She smiled into her cup. In the living room, the shelf stood straight and full. Top shelf alphabetical, second shelf chronological, with new books added since I first stacked them. Third shelf shorter now because she had moved some to the second shelf. She had finally read them. On the coffee table sat a small frame sketch. A community library I had drawn at midnight one Wednesday because our conversation about building without constraints would not leave my head. One story, natural light, a reading courtyard with a single tree. She had taken it to a frame shop without telling me and placed it where anyone who walked in would see it. When I first noticed it, she had said, "That belongs where people can see it. You have hidden it long enough." And beside the bookshelf in the corner she had cleared specifically for it, sat a wooden rocking chair, spindle back, hand-shaped red oak seat, smooth runners resting against the hardwood floor. I had built it in her garage over 3 weekends using my father's tools, following the marks he had left in the wood like a map drawn for me to find when I was ready. My father had died 3 years ago, quietly. A heart condition he never told anyone was serious. I found his workshop after the funeral, tools perfect on the pegboard, a half-finished rocking chair in the center of the room. I took the pieces home but never assembled them, because I was afraid I would do it wrong and ruin the last thing his hands had touched. Caroline had said to me one evening, "He did not leave you those pieces so they could lean against a wall, Ethan." That sentence unlocked something I had kept sealed for 3 years. She sat in it first, rocked once, slowly, and said, "He would have loved that it is in a home again." I could not speak. She did not make me. Now she looked at me across the kitchen table. This woman who ran a division and organized books by memory and left the radio on so the house would not be quiet and spent 15 years building a life so complete there was no room in it for anyone else until a man showed up with a cardboard box and saw what no one else had bothered to look for. She said, "You know what I like most about Tuesdays and Saturdays?" "What?" "They are not enough anymore. I want the other 5 days too." I reached across the table and took her hand. She held on the way she always did, without hesitation, like a woman who had spent years letting go and finally found something worth gripping. "Then take them," I said. She laced her fingers through mine. "I already have." Outside, the morning was bright and still. The bookshelf stood solid against the wall. The rocking chair sat in the warm light, and the radio on the counter played something soft and steady, but she had not turned it on this morning. She had not needed to. The house was not quiet anymore. Some things just need the right hands, and the patience to let the bloom breathe before you pour. Now let me ask you something, and I mean this. Have you ever met someone who saw the version of you that you stopped showing the world? Someone who did not ask you to perform, or pretend, or be smaller than you are? Someone who just looked at you and said, "I see what is really there, and I am not leaving." If you have, hold on to them. If you have not, do not stop believing they are coming. Because the people who change your life do not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes they arrive with a cardboard box and a Tuesday evening and a cup of coffee you never asked for. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button. And most importantly, tap that notification bell and turn on all notifications. Because the stories we are building on this channel are only getting deeper, only getting more powerful, and if you do not turn on that bell, you will miss the next one. And trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next.